Ready? All right. Good morning and welcome back to another reading of Hoot. We are joined today by a trustworthy snake. He's been a part of the family for quite some time and has only been a loving snake. So I've allowed him to be in the video today. We've got a coffee mug that belongs to my wife. It says, "Your argument is irrelevant," instead of irrelevant. I thought it was adorable. And speaking of adorable, we've got Senor Diego behind me, perky and ready for the story. So let's dive right in. We left off on chapter 6. Here we go. At breakfast the next morning, Roy asked if it was against the law for a kid his age not to go to school. His mother said, "Well, I'm not sure if it's an actual law, but..." "Oh, yes it is," his father cut in. "Truancy is what it's called." "Can they put you in jail?" Roy asked. "Usually they just put you back in school," Mr. Eberhardt said. Half jokingly, he added, "You weren't thinking of dropping out, were you?" Roy said no, school was all right. "I bet I know what this is about," Mrs. Eberhardt said. "You're worried about bumping into the Matheson boy again. See, didn't I tell you the apology letter was too assertive?" "The letter was just fine," Roy's father said, spreading over the newspaper. If it was just fine, then why is Roy so scared? Why is he talking about dropping out of school? "I'm not scared," Roy said, "and I don't want to drop out of school. It's just..." His mother eyed him. "What?" "Nothing, Mom." Roy decided not to tell his parents about the encounter with the mullet fingers and the running boy. Being in the law enforcement, Roy's father probably was required to report all crimes, even truancy. Roy didn't want to get the kid in trouble. "Listen to this," Mrs. Eberhardt said. Listen to this," Mr. Eberhardt said, and began reading aloud from the newspaper. "A Coconut Cove police cruiser was vandalized early Monday morning while parked at a construction site on East Oriole Avenue. The officer had fallen asleep inside the car at the time, according to the police spokesman." "Can you believe that?" Roy's mother clucked. "Sleeping on duty. That's disgraceful. They should have fired that fella." Roy thought about the story and he thought it was pretty amusing. "It gets better," his father said. "Listen. The incident happened shortly before sunrise when an unknown prankster sneaked up to the patrol car, a 2001 Crown Victoria, and spray painted the windows with black paint. Roy, who had a mouthful of Raisin Bran, burst out laughing. Milk dribbled down his chin. Mr. Eberhardt was also smiling as he continued. Coconut Cove Police Chief Merle Deacon declined to release the name of the officer who fell asleep, saying that his part of a special surveillance team investigating property crimes on the east side of town. Deacon said the officer has recently been ill with the flu and had been given medication that made him drowsy. Roy's father looked up from the article. Medication. Ha! "What else does the story say?" Mrs. Eberhardt asked. "Let's see. It says this was the third suspicious incident within a week at this location, which is the future home of Mother Paula's All-American Pancake House." Roy's mother brightened. "We're getting a Mother Paula's here in Coconut Cove? That'll be nice." Roy swabbed a napkin across his chin. "Dad, what else happened out there?" "I was wondering the same thing." Mr. Eberhardt skimmed the rest of the article. "Here it is. Last Monday, unknown intruders uprooted survey stakes from the property. 4 days later, vandals entered the site and placed live alligators in 3 portable toilets. According to the police, the reptiles were captured unharmed and later released into a nearby canal. No arrests have yet been made." Mrs. Eberhardt rose and started clearing the breakfast dishes. "Alligators," she said. "Good heavens, what next?" Mr. Eberhardt folded the paper and tossed it onto the kitchen counter. "This is turning out to be an interesting little town after all, isn't it, Roy?" Roy picked up the newspaper to see for himself. East Oriole Avenue sounded familiar. As he read the story, Roy remembered where he had seen the street sign. Beatrice Leap's bus stop. The police had first spotted the running boy. The place where he had first spotted the running boy. It was right there on West Oriole Avenue, just the other side of the main highway. The article doesn't say how big the alligators were, Roy remarked. His father chuckled. "I don't think it's important, son. I think it's the thought that counts." And here's a pause in the story. Looks like we're going into Officer Delinko's portion of the story. The police captain said, "I've read your report, David. Is there anything else you'd like to add?" Officer Delinko shook his head. His hands were folded on his lap. What could he say? His sergeant spoke up. David understands how serious this is. Embarrassing is the word, the captain said. The chief has been sharing some of the emails and phone messages with me. It's not pretty. Did you see the newspaper? Officer Delinko just nodded. He had read and reread the article a dozen times. Each time it made his stomach churn. You probably noticed that your name wasn't mentioned, the captain said. That's because we refused to release it to the media. Yes, thank you, Officer Delinko said. I'm very sorry about all this, sir. And you read Chief Deacon's explanation for what happened? I assume you're comfortable with that? To be honest, sir, I haven't had the flu, and I wasn't taking any medication yesterday. David, the sergeant cut in. If the chief says you were taking flu medication, you were definitely taking flu medication. And if the chief says that's why you fell asleep in the patrol car, well then that's exactly what happened. Do you understand? Oh, yes, sir. The captain held up a yellow slip of paper. This is a bill from the Ford dealership for $410. They got that black paint off your windows. That's the good news. Took them all day, but they did it. Officer Delinko was sure that the captain was going to hand him the repair bill, but he didn't. Instead, he placed it inside the patrolman's personnel file, which lay open on his desk. Officer, I don't know what to do with you. I just don't. The captain's tone was one of paternal disappointment. I'm very sorry, sir. It won't happen again, sir. Officer Delinko's sergeant said, Captain, I ought to tell you that David volunteered for the surveillance duty at the construction site, and he went out early in the morning on his own off-duty time. His own time? The captain folded his arms. Well, that's commendable, David. Can I ask why you did that? Well, because I wanted to catch the perpetrators, Officer Delinko replied. I knew it was a priority with you and with the chief. That's the only reason? You didn't have some sort of personal stake in the case? I do now, thought Officer Delinko, now that they've made a fool of me. No, sir. No personal stake. The captain turned his attention toward the sergeant. Well, there's got to be some type of punishment, whether we like it or not. The chief's taking too much grief over this. I agree, the sergeant said. Officer Delinko's heart sank. Any disciplinary action would automatically become part of his permanent record. It might be an issue when it came time for promotion. Sir, I'll pay the bill myself, Officer Delinko offered. $410 was a serious chunk out of his paycheck, but keeping his record spotless was worth every penny. The captain said it was not necessary for Delinko to cover the bill, and that would not satisfy the chief. So, I'm putting you on desk duty, he said, for a month. David can live with that, said the sergeant. But what about Weather Paula's surveillance? Officer Delinko asked. Don't worry, we'll get it covered. We'll pull somebody off the midnight shift. Yes, sir, Officer Delinko said, depressed at the idea of being stuck behind a desk, doing nothing for a whole boring month. Still, it was better than being suspended. The only thing worse than sitting at headquarters would be sitting at home. The captain stood up, which meant the meeting was over. He said, David, if anything like this ever happens again. Oh, it won't, I promise. Next time, you're definitely going to see your name in the newspaper. Yes, sir. Under a headline that says, Officer Terminated. Is that clear? Officer Delinko cringed inwardly. I understand, sir, he said quietly to the captain. He wondered if the little jerks who sprayed his Crown Victoria realized how much trouble they were getting him into. My whole career is in jeopardy, Officer Delinko thought angrily, all because of some smart, juvenile delinquents. He was more determined than ever to catch them in the act. In the hall outside the captain's office, the sergeant told him, You can pick up your car at Motor Pool. But remember, David, you're off-road patrol. That means you're allowed to drive the unit home and back, and that's all. Right, said Officer Delinko. Home and back. Got it. He had already thought of a route that would take him directly past the corner of East Oriole and Woodbury, the future location of Mother Paula's All-American Pancake House. Nobody said he couldn't leave his house extra early in the morning. Nobody said he couldn't take his sweet time getting to work. And here we pause in the story again. It looks like we're going back to Roy's portion of the story. Dana Matherson was absent from school again. Roy felt somewhat relieved, though not enough to relax. The longer Dana had to stay home, so his nose could recover from Roy's punch, the nastier he would be when he finally returned to middle school. You still got time to blow town, Garrett suggested hopefully. I'm not running away. What happens, happens. Roy wasn't trying to act cool. He thought about the Dana situation. Another confrontation seemed inevitable, and part of him simply wanted to get it over with. He wasn't cocky, but he had a stubborn streak of pride. He had no intention of spending the rest of the year cowering in the restroom or sneaking through the halls just to avoid some dumb bully. I probably shouldn't tell you this, said Garrett, but some of the kids are talking and taking bets. Great. They're betting on whether Dana's gonna beat me up? Oh, no. No, on how many times he's gonna beat you up. Great, said Roy. Actually, two good things have come out of the altercation with Dana Matherson. The first was Roy successfully tailing the barefoot boy to the golf course. The second was Roy being booted off the bus for 2 weeks by the vice principal. It was nice having his mother pick him up at school. They got a chat in the car, and Roy arrived home 20 minutes earlier than normal. The phone was ringing when he walked in the door. It was his mother's sister calling from California to chat. Roy seized the opportunity to retrieve a cardboard shoebox from his room and slipped quietly out the back door of the house. He was heading for the golf course again with a slight detour. Instead of making a left on West Oriole toward the bus stop, Roy rode his bicycle across the highway to East Oriole. He had gone less than 2 blocks when he came upon a scrub-covered lot with dented work trailer in one corner. Parked beside the trailer was a blue pickup truck. Not far away sat 3 bulldozer-type vehicles and a row of portable toilets. Roy figured this had been the same place where the police car got spray-painted and the alligators were hidden inside the latrines. As soon as Roy stopped his bicycle, the door of the trailer flew open and a stocky, bald man charged out. He wore stiff tan work pants and a tan shirt that had a name stitched into the breast, but Roy was too far away to read it. "What do you want?" the man snapped, his face flushed with anger. "Hey kid, I'm talking to you." Roy thought, what's his problem? The man came towards him, pointing. "What's in the box?" he yelled. "You've got your little buddies. What do they got planned for me tonight, huh?" Roy spun his bike around and started pedaling away. The guy was acting like a total psychopath. "That's right, and don't come back," the bald man hollered, shaking a fist. "Next time there'll be guard dogs waiting for you. The meanest dogs you ever saw." "Right, buddy? Just like you? Want to come here? Come here. Come here. Stay. Good boy." Okay, you gonna sit from over there? All right. Roy pedaled faster. He didn't turn around. The clouds were darkening, and he thought he felt a raindrop on one cheek. From the distance came a rumble of thunder. Even after crossing the highway to West Oriole, Roy didn't slow his pace. By the time he'd made it to the golf course, a steady drizzle was coming down. He hopped off his bike, shielding the box with both arms, and began to jog across the deserted green fairway. Soon he reached the thicket of pepper trees where he'd encountered the boy called Mullet Fingers. Roy had mentally prepared himself to be blindfolded and tied up again. He'd even composed a short speech for the occasion. He was determined to persuade Mullet Fingers that he was someone to be trusted, and that he hadn't come to interfere but rather to help if Mullet Fingers needed it. While working on his way through the thicket, Roy grabbed a dead branch off the ground. It was heavy enough to make an impression on a cottonmouth moccasin, though he'd hoped he wouldn't need it. When he got to the ditch, he saw no signs of the deadly sparkle-tailed snakes. The running boys' camp was gone, cleaned out. All the plastic bags had been removed, and the fire pit had been buried. Roy poked the tip of the dead branch through the loose dirt, but it yielded no clues. Glumly, he checked for footprints and found none. Mullet Fingers had fled without a trace. As Roy emerged into the fairway, the purple sky opened up. Rain slashed down in wind-driven sheets that stung his face, and lightning crashed ominously nearby. Roy shivered and took off running. In an electrical storm, the worst place was to be was on a golf course, of course, standing near trees. As he ran, flinching at every thunderclap, he began to feel guilty about sneaking away from the house. His mother would be worried sick when she realized he was out in this weather. She might even get in the car and come searching for him, a prospect that troubled Roy. He didn't want his mom driving around in such dangerous conditions. The rain was so heavy that she wouldn't be able to see the road, at least not very well. As wet and weary as he was, Roy forced himself to run faster. Squinting through the downpour, he kept thinking, it can't be much further. It can't be much further. He was looking for the water fountain where he'd left his bicycle. Finally, as another wild burst of lightning illuminated the fairway, he spotted it 20 yards ahead of him. But his bicycle wasn't there. At first, Roy thought it was the wrong fountain. He thought he must have lost his direction in the storm. Then he recognized a nearby utility shed and a wooden kiosk with a soda machine. This was the exact place, all right. Roy stood in the rain and stared miserably at the spot where he'd left his bike. Usually he was careful about locking it, but today he'd been in too much of a hurry. Now it was missing, stolen undoubtedly. To get away from the rain, Roy dashed into the wooden kiosk, The soggy cardboard box was coming apart in his hands. It would be a very long walk home. Roy knew he couldn't get there before nightfall. His parents would go bananas. For 10 minutes, Roy stood in the kiosk, dripping on the floor, waiting for the downpour to slacken. The lightning and the thunder seemed to be rolling eastward, but the rain just wouldn't quit. Finally, Roy stepped outside, lowered his head, and started trudging in the direction of his neighborhood. Every step made a splash. Raindrops streaked down his forehead and clung to his eyelashes. He wished he'd worn a cap. When he got to the sidewalk, he tried to run, but it was like sloshing through the shallows of an endless lake. Roy had noticed this about Florida. It was so low and so flat that puddles took forever to drain. He plodded onward, and soon he reached the bus stop where he first spotted the running boy. Roy didn't pause to look around. It was growing darker by the minute. Just as he made it to the corner of West Oriole and the highway, the streetlights flickered on. Oh, brother, he thought, I'm really late now. Traffic was steady in both directions, creeping through the standing water. Roy waited impatiently. Every car pushed a wake that splashed against his shins. He didn't care. He was already soaked to the bone. Spying a gap in the traffic, Roy ventured into the road. Watch it, shouted a voice behind him. Roy jumped back on the curb and spun around. There was Beatrice Leap, sitting on his bicycle. She said, "What's in the shoebox, cowgirl?" Huh. So apparently Beatrice stole Roy's bike. I wonder if he locked it up and she stole it by breaking the lock, or I wonder if he really did forget to lock it up and she just took it to teach him a lesson. Anyway, this is getting to be really good. I'll be back tomorrow for Chapter 7. I hope you're enjoying the story.